So what should businesses really be worrying about with AI?
I'll call it unstructured implementation. And those are two 50-cent words for people signing up for free ChatGPT accounts and putting company data in them, or their own personal accounts. Because either way, they probably signed up for those accounts with a personal email, and they start using this. I mean, we see this across all of our customers, and here it is. I'll say accountant, just because it's easy. They will routinely drop 2 Excel files into ChatGPT and say, can you compare these and give me an answer like which one seems to be closer to X, right? Well, that works, and it makes her more efficient, him, whoever, more efficient, and then they keep going, and the amount of company or client data that's in that personal account accumulates. And then something bad happens. They quit. And you know what happens to all your data? Walks out the door, because they have access to that account. That's what businesses should fear. They need a structured implementation to keep that from happening.
So I'm Melissa Glatone at Matrix Podcast, and
I'm Andy Harrover at Matrix Computer Consulting and or Podcast.
All right, so everybody's being told to adopt AI, but nobody's telling them how to do it. And with something like that happening, maybe they should.
Yeah. I mean, everybody is explicitly pro AI. The bosses are reading stories in the Wall Street Journal and stuff like that encourage adoption of AI, and the issues that no one is really sure, like what's the best way to do it. And the companies that figure this out have a real edge. And the ones that wait 2 years will be too far behind, really. A lot of them will survive, but they'll be not as efficient as other companies. So the problem isn't really the tech with AI, it's operations and operational maturity. That's the real issue with AI.
Right. So by the end of this, you'll know the 3 questions to ask before you switch anything on.
Yeah, and anything we mean AI. So whatever your policy is, some of your people are already using AI. Not most, but more than you think. And usually it's your better employees. They're putting client information, emails into AI to get a leg up on like a response to a sensitive email. AI can kind of help you navigate that. And asking it also to review client documents, contracts, things like that. And it's dangerous.
Right. But come on. So that's a little fear-mongering side. We've been putting information into Google for the last 20 years, right?
Yeah, but nobody ever dropped a client contract into Google.
Fair.
And, I guess there's always been public websites for that kind of stuff, but people don't use it for that. With AI, it seems like your own private little enclave, and it's not, especially if it's an unpaid account, something like that. That data is just out there.
So what does an owner actually do on Monday morning?
Ask your staff about it. Do it in such a way that no one thinks they're in trouble, because then they're not going to talk, right? They're just going to sit on their hands. Well, if the boss is asking about it, there must be a problem. Ask. You'll get more from your folks if you engage them in that way, because what we call in the industry shadow IT. These are IT functions that your staff are using that are not under your control or something you didn't provide. And that can occasionally be a risk.
Right, but okay, so we've rolled out plenty of software. What makes this different?
Because every other tool you've bought does nothing new. It does a very, Excel. Well, I want to do spreadsheets. I want to crunch a bunch of numbers. Word, I want to write some stuff. Nothing really is as open-ended as AI is. It's just not.
Right.
You could argue that the internet is kind of the same risk, but AI, turns it up to 10. It really does.
Right.
You just kind of like a way to think about this. Picture hiring somebody new on day one, instead of showing them their desk and hand them all of their stuff and make sure that they're happy. You just hand them a master key to every filing cabinet in the building and say, go find what you need. A better metaphor these days would have been an administrator password, not a key, but same idea. And this is what happens when you switch AI on, unless you have done an audit and set up the guardrails. Security, security, security. And it's not so much AI is going to get you hacked, but it may provide and introduce things into your environment that you don't want. So you have to set up AI properly from the get-go.
Okay, so that sounds like a knock on whoever set up our systems, right?
A little bit. A little bit. And, internally, it can be, and we see this, if this happens at your business, it doesn't mean that you're doing bad things. The system was set up all those years ago by Tom's kid, and now you've hired an IT company, and they look at those permissions. They've suggested changes to them. You're busy. You're running a small business. It doesn't happen. So data ends up being overshared. This is also true in SharePoint, where a lot of times businesses did not take a top-down approach in SharePoint. They just, Fred has set up a SharePoint site for, accounting. Oh, okay, that's great. But Fred doesn't know anything about permissions. It happens in small businesses.
So what kinds of things actually do surface?
A lot of things. The folder from the layoffs, notes from the acquisition that didn't happen, an HR complaint, partner distributions, the file where somebody, wrote down all of the passwords in 2019, yes. Stuff like that. Like I said, it's a bit of an unguided missile, and it's really nobody's fault, especially in a small business. It's just the way that things grow, and that's why, there's a term if you get into AI, you'll hear this a lot: data governance. Mm-hmm. And data governance is making sure people have the access to the right stuff. So.
Okay, so if all the data is safe, what else could go sideways?
So the most common failure isn't a breach. It's spending a ton of money on licenses that nobody uses. Mm. So after security, this is the thing that we see a lot. And we were guilty of it. Every time we do some sort of AI project, we're like, oh, well, this widget would make life a lot easier. It's only $10 a month. Well, it's $120 a year. And I guarantee you, between us, we've got a half a dozen, maybe 10 widgets. And so now, you're talking about real money. So that's it. It's not so much that you get people like a Claude license and mm-hmm. they don't ever use it. We don't see that as often. So,
but if it saves everybody 10 minutes a day, then it's paid for already, right?
Maybe. It seems simple, right? But the math isn't quite that easy. It does save people time. Those aren't the same thing until somebody decides what time gets used for. 20 minutes a day back is only worth something if it turns into something more productive. If people save 30 minutes a day, an hour a day, you have to make sure that when you're talking with your employees that these are efficiencies gained by the business.
So how do we figure out who needs it before we spend the money?
Well, the natural first step is to get an inventory, do two things. Get an inventory of what your people are using and get an inventory of what licenses you already own. Okay. Odds are they're using free AI already. And then there's the stuff that your marketing manager bought because AI is fantastic at writing marketing copy. And so maybe they have a couple of things or some bots or whatever. So find out what your people are using and then find out what you already own. The second step we've touched on already. What can AI already see? This goes back to data governance. So before you switch this thing on for hopefully a test group,
right,
you want to do an audit. Find out where the data is, find out what the permissions are, because you don't want it going outside of your four walls, right? So that's step two.
Well, and what if the list is bad?
I mean, the list is always a little bad. People are surprised at the extent to which their folks employ tools that they don't have licenses for, things like that. In our consulting field, we call that shadow IT. But you just have to deal with it. You have to take it on. It's not a hunt for the guilty. So, the third question is still part of this initial meeting. What would you actually use this for? What are some ideas? You need some use cases for AI. And I know that use cases sound like something you get from, a giant consulting firm and it comes on a glossy piece of paper. But internal use cases, just talk about it. What are the worst, most horrible parts of a job that you could automate away? I mean, stuff as simple as that, right? So that's what you use it for. A lot of times the discussion starts as, we're going to increase productivity. That's hard to manage. It's hard to measure, right?
Right.
So, even like you use IT. Well, how much more efficient are you, Melissa?
A lot.
Yeah. I've noticed.
Time back.
But seriously, that's it. It's hard. You have to work with the client, our customers, our clients, to come up with those kinds of things.
Okay, so is this a 6-month consulting thing with a big giant binder at the end?
No. It has to move much faster than that. It's probably the total of it is probably about 8 weeks, something like that. But your people should be in AI working after 4 weeks. And the rest of it, you just kind of build as you go. And including, you have to educate them. Prompting and stuff like that is seriously important. But it should be quicker. Now, you'll end up spending time on it. Once you get to the end of that onboarding, then there's naturally a follow-on about automation. It's a much faster tempo. And you need, as a part of that, this sort of like safe path forward, right? And that's what we're going to talk about. Is that the three questions, right?
Right.
It's the safe path forward. And that means, you have a 1-page AI policy and that your staff will actually read. You hand them a 40-page document, they're not going to read that. It's like handing them a company policy manual. They'll sign it, but they have not read it, generally speaking. I shouldn't say that, but but at the end of the day, management has to approve something. They have to approve a policy. For us, it's a project, and the policy comes as a byproduct of the project after we do our audit and stuff like that. So we have to make sure that we provide an AI facility that's easy to use so people don't use personal accounts.
Okay, so where do you go once the rules are set?
So I think after the rules are set, that's when you want to start meeting with the staff or the managers or whatever, because the next logical step is automation. And your people will be more productive just with Claude or ChatGPT or whatever you want to use. Once they get the hang of it, they'll be more productive. This thing feeds itself. It's like, I think it was Elon Musk likes the phrase, self-licking ice cream cone. It really is. It really is, because then they figure out, well, I can use it for Excel, or I can do this or that or the other. So that's it. I mean, after that, once you have that solid foundation, then you want to start looking at automations. And you automate away. And this is surprisingly easy to begin with, because when you start asking people, like, what's the worst part of your job? If you didn't have to do this part of your job anymore, what is it? They know. Immediately. And if usually it's possible to put together some automation that makes that part much easier.
So, Monday morning, what is the ask without any IT department?
Well, you need to ask your team about how they're currently using AI. And again, very important that this is not a hunt for the guilty. You want honest feedback. It makes the later parts go better. 2, before you buy a single seat, find out, what are your people using? What do you already own? Because, then you want to factor that into what you're going to license going forward, right?
Right.
And the last one is, name 3 real jobs that you wanted to do. If you can't, you need to wait. But trust me, if you do any kind of marketing, even if the owner is taking funny pictures and putting them on Facebook, AI, baby. It can write all the copy that you need. You start putting that stuff on LinkedIn, things like that. There's 3 things. I mean, when we meet with clients to start this process, that takes less than an hour. And we have a bucket full of ideas.
Okay, so this isn't about slowing down, it's about not having to undo it later.
Yeah, it's about having not to pull all the wires out, get rid of all of the stuff and do it right the first time.
Right.
Because if you don't do it in a structured manner, and you have people using personal ChatGPT accounts, that data can walk out the door and there's nothing you can do about it. So.
Okay. So that ends our podcast for today. And if you liked, please share it with others so we can keep it going.
Yep. There we go.